to the She's a 10 times 5 show with hosts Laurie Jabbar and Michelle Emick. We're bringing public figures, subject matter experts, and other accomplished guests to the Studio 50 table to serve you up the best tips, tricks, and key takeaways that all us midlifers want to know about. Okay, time to join us for some times 5 fun. Let's go.
Okay, all you tenors, we're bringing a topic into Studio 50 that many of us are obsessed with. True crime. Whether we lean into docuseries, binge-worthy streaming shows, or podcasts, more than 1/3 of mainstream audiences are consuming crime-related content. Laurie and Michelle talked to the co-hosts of the award-winning true crime podcast, Small Town Dicks. Small Town Dicks is a podcast about the big-time crime that's happening in small-town USA. Host Yeardley Smith is an Emmy Award-winning actress, novelist, and playwright who has appeared on television, film, and Broadway. She has been the voice of Lisa Simpson on Fox's hit television show, The Simpsons, since 1987. Her co-host and husband, Detective Dan, is a seasoned retired police detective who has investigated violent crimes. They will get you under the hood of the world of true crime. Let's go. Look as good as you feel with great skin made simple. Welcome to the all-in-one skincare system created by world-renowned plastic surgeon Dr. Amir Karam. There's no need to look anywhere else. The Karam MD Trifecta packs more than 20 state-of-the-art ingredients into an easy 3-step system that addresses all aspects of aging for your best skin ever. Use discount code SHE'S10 for 10% off your purchase. Let's go.
Okay, welcome Yeardley and Detective Dan.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here.
Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, so just to give you a preface, when we sat down and we decided the topics we wanted to cover this season, in our age group, in our genre of audience, we are all obsessed with true crime. It's the thing. And we really wanted to kind of dive in and talk about it. And I had come across your podcast and fell in love, and so did Michelle. She's been down the rabbit hole here. I had to pull her up to get out of it. So I think it would have been really great if we start off the conversation with how you guys got started and started launching the podcast and what you've learned along the way and what we can learn from listening.
Okay, great. Dan?
So back to my career, I started on patrol and everything, was a canine handler, and eventually became a detective starting in financial crimes, which if you ever want to fall asleep, read a financial crimes report. Really easy to fall asleep. Shortly after being a financial crimes detective, I became a violent crimes detective, and Yeardley came to my town. I worked in a small town in the Northwest part of the country, and she had a media appearance in the town that I worked in, and I was voluntold to take care of her.
He was my bodyguard.
Yeah, during her media appearance. So that's how we met. I met her at the airport, spent about 30 minutes with her the first day, got to know her, found her very attractive. Eventually we became a couple, and going from there. So I have a twin brother named Dave, and Dave is a sex crimes and child abuse detective. He was, now he's retired, but Dave lived a few blocks from me, and whenever Yeardley was in town, Yeardley loves my brother, hopefully loves me more than my brother, and she would come over, and she would ask us questions about what our week was like, different cases that we were working. There were a few occasions where Yeardley came in town, and I was on call 24/7, so my phone would ring. One particular time, we had only spent a couple hours together, and my phone rang, and I didn't see her the rest of the weekend, and I was working on a homicide case. So she found it fascinating, and Dave and I would tell stories to Yeardley, and Yeardley had friends, and we would tell stories to her friends when we were with her friends. And that's kind of the nexus of
Yeah, I think, podcasts, we started in 2017,
17.
and started Small Town Dicks in 2017. And podcasts were sort of becoming quite popular. We were really at the cusp of true crime blowing up the way it has. And so we kind of got in under the radar, a little under the door like water. And the thing that we had that was unique, that you didn't have so much in podcasts, though you have quite often in television, is we decided all of the stories would be told by the detectives who investigated them, all of the cases. And that I had a former co-host in the first few seasons, we would be you. We would sit across the table and ask any question that came to mind, both clarifying questions and also, why do you do it that way? Sort of, and who are you and how do you do what you do and why? And so that was it. And honestly, people ask us all the time about the title of our podcast, Small Town Dicks, and it was a joke.
It was a joke. And it stuck.
And we're stuck with it. I think we literally thought like, well, our moms will listen and maybe 15 other people. And now here we are at 50 million downloads, and we're stuck with Small Town Dicks. So we roll with it. But that's how it came to be. It really was quite organic, and we're unique in that we're independently owned and operated by my company, Paperclip Limited. And for anyone who wants to launch a podcast, if you're going to do it with anything other than just recording on your iPhone, as you guys know, it's expensive. So, and to do it well, and now podcasts are so ubiquitous, I really feel like it's paramount that you be respectful of people's time, because time is our most precious commodity. And so we're very, I insist on no crosstalk on our podcast. If you think about it, nobody is just listening to your podcast. They're all doing something else while they listen to your podcast.
Yes.
So you don't have 100% of their attention. So we've learned a lot in that regard.
Well, I mean, like Laurie said, I'm obsessed. And once you start listening, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to hear the next one. So I think one of the fascinations I know for myself is I grew up in a small town, and we all know one of these type of stories. And it's it's always somebody that they knew. At least that's what it seems like. And so you guys talk about big crime in small towns. And I think I read somewhere where you said normal people can do horrendous things. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I always say law enforcement and any first responder job, really, and including the military, these are not normal jobs. You are going into situations that the rest of us run from, basically, though we do our very best to avoid. In law enforcement and fire departments, ERs, you're meeting people on their worst day. But Dan can speak to seeing everything that, the worst things that people do to each other. It's just staggering.
Yeah, throughout your career, you're going to see you see every kind of person there is, from socioeconomic backgrounds, people who are drug affected. You see the gamut of people out there, and people in crisis, especially. Things can go sideways very quickly. And unfortunately, sometimes it costs someone their life. And unfortunately, the police are there to put things back together, solve a crime, ensure public safety by getting that whoever the suspect is off the street. And I've seen it time and time again. It's one bad decision leads to another bad decision, which leads to another bad decision. And here we are. The police are at your door, and someone's going away to prison for the rest of their life, and you've got a shattered family left behind. So it's unfortunate, but it happens everywhere. It's just with not the same frequency in a small town as a big town.
And I always want to know from our detectives, if that's your day-to-day, where does that live inside of you? Where do you put that? And how do you, when you clock out of your shift, how do you go home and be a husband, a wife, a mother, a sister, a brother, a father? And they all say, you just put it in a little box. And then if you wait long enough, couple minutes, they'll tell you the lock on the box isn't that good. And all of that stuff, it seems, it will come for you. You cannot see that much trauma, even if you're not on the receiving end of this, of the trauma specifically, and not have it bubble up eventually. It wants to be dealt with. And that's a really big conversation, I think, with first responders. And we cover it fairly often, actually, on Small Town Dicks. And I think it's really important.
Yeah, I don't think there's a guest we've had that hasn't seen the effects of repeated exposure to traumatic events. That
100%.
we all have. We just we deal with it differently, and some people have a better tolerance than others.
Yeah. I listened to a great episode you guys had that talked about yourself and Detective Dave and the PTSD. And I think that's something that we just take for granted as community members. And I think it was very illuminating to hear that, because it made me step back and say, wow, what these guys go through and gals is something that we really underappreciate.
I think that's true. And I think the frustration is that a lot of departments, and hopefully this is improving, but even if they offer some sort of mental health services, it's not encouraged, and it really, really slaps a stigma on you. You know, if Dan says, yes, I'm going to go see the counselor because my partner was killed in the line of duty, he now walks down the hall and they go, oh, it's crazy Dan walking down the hall, you know, and it's really unfair. You want it both ways, and it's not sustainable. So I'm hoping, as we have these conversations on our podcast and other people have them around the world, that those services and the destigmatization of that is really taking hold.
I think slowly the tide is turning, and we have departments that are actively working with their officers on their emotional wellness, and it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, I guess, Yardley, you didn't come from any this field. Is there anything, does it stick with you? Because I mean, you're really going in depth with these stories.
Yes. We have actually three now really fantastic editors that are full-time. And, but I do the last pass of each episode. I hear the final edit and sort of little bits and bobs of editing here and there. And so I really feel like I have to put on a different hat, because I'm getting about, 3% of what the people who actually are telling the story, what they've had to go through in order for us to have that episode. But at the same time, I don't think you can hear the worst things that people do to each other and not have it affect you. I think it's kind of like a slow drip, like a slow drip of poison. I think if I look back at 2017 and now here we are in 2023, probably my overall trust of the world has gone down, just from also living and being married to Dan. I'm more on high alert than I used to be, but by no means as much code orange as Dan is. So I try to straddle the fence.
Well,
I'm already fairly anxious, so that would be bad.
But I would say this, what about flipping that to the positive? Because the amount of information, the level of detail that goes on these episodes, you must get fan mail or feedback that says, hey, I didn't know this, and now I do.
Oh my God, so much. First of all, we have the most extraordinary fan base who are so engaged, but you cannot believe the private messages they send us, the things that they go, oh my God, this happened to me. This is what the outcome was. I learned so much. I'm now going to make sure that I know all my child's passwords on their phone, stuff like that. You're absolutely right. But I'm always staggered by how much information they share with us. We're so honored, but I feel like that's a testament to the vulnerability of the detectives we have on the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's one of the kind of, I don't even know how to say it.
I always use artifacts.
Yeah, one of the artifacts of our podcast is my brother, his caseload was I could never do it. Sex crimes and child abuse. I don't want any part of that. I will arrest the guy. I don't want to interview anybody. That's just too much for me.
Or watch the
And
videos, right?
or watch the videos
Every single one.
and my brother, he's brought us on this podcast several cases, and I think the thing that stands out the most to me and that's really rewarding and probably whether or not my brother would admit it is rewarding to him is when people reach out to him and they disclose to us in messages that they were abused as a child and that listening to our podcast empowered them to uh, you know, seek help or report it. Because my brother often says people report when they're ready to report it. You can't force people to disclose child abuse, and that's one of the things that my brother and I take away from the podcast and the feedback we get from our fans, as well as our other host Paul Holes, he's kind of a legend, that Paul guy. But
He's all right.
yeah,
Well, one of the things that I, excuse me, also appreciate is there is a strong educational element to your work. And, you know, like the, what we glean from cell phones and digital and cyber and things that I think a lot of people don't really deep dive on, but need to know. Tell me how that became integrated into what you do.
I think law enforcement is largely reactive. We try to go out and be proactive, but typically huge things that happen in a city, we're going to get called to. It's not that we witnessed them and we weren't there when it happened. So if you take that theme of being reactive, we have had to try to play catch up to technology. And our department in particular was one of the first ones in my state that actually recognized there was a void in the space of investigators who were really good at finding digital evidence. And we were pretty proactive about it. We hired, I call his office the nerdery, because it's just all these different machines and our detective, his name is Robert, self-proclaimed nerd. He was really good at it, and he went out to a bunch of different trainings, and he learned very quickly how to retrieve evidence that otherwise people would have said, there's no way we're going to get to that. And he's very good at it, and it's been huge for our department. And he actually helps out regionally, departments try to extract evidence from technology. Usually it's a cell phone, but computers, hard drives, things like that.
Yeah. There was a case at my son's college where they came in and they took all of the mobile devices and extracted the truth. So I know that to be something very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, we did, so Dave, as part of his caseload, sex crimes and child abuse, he would also go around to community centers and PTA meetings and various gatherings where there were parents and say, this is what's happening on your child's phone. I always remember one story he gave. There's an app that looks like a calculator, but is actually a hidden chat app. It's where where predators hang out. It's like a park bench for them. And when you come into the room as the parent, your child can just go, oh, it's just a calculator. Like you literally can't tell. And so Dave really felt like it was part of his responsibility, at least in his community, to say, here are all the things that I'm pretty sure you don't know, and here are all the things you really want to know. So we got so much. We originally did an episode that was a Patreon episode, which is a little paid subscription thing for $5 a month. You get extra content. You get the episodes first and ad-free. And so we did it as a Patreon episode where Dave basically gave the talk that he used to give at these community centers. And the response was so overwhelming. We're like, you can't put this behind the paywall. Oh my God, you got to let this out. And so we did. We put it on the main feed and people's heads popped off. It was just extraordinary. They couldn't believe it.
No, I'm definitely going to lean into that one because I have an 11-year-old and we can't get enough information. You know, we're
100%.
not up on technology like the younger kids are. So any help we can get is appreciated.
Yeah, it changes every week too. There's a new app that comes out that spreads like wildfire among teenagers, and here we are playing catch up again, trying to figure out how do we get into this. What are the different ways that teens are using the app? It's just an ongoing battle.
Yeah, and I think as parents, you know, you can't really stop the train. It's gone and it's moving. And so really the right way to handle it is to become educated and to be honest and educate your children, especially as they become teenagers and more independent.
And you can't believe how bold these child predators are. I mean, they cast a net, right? And let's say it's one of your kids, God forbid, and your daughter comes and says, I don't know, this guy says he wants to meet me, you know, in the park tomorrow. And if the case comes to, for instance, Detective Dave and Detective Dan, and they actually intercept this guy and are able to arrest him, you'll find out, oh, he cast 300 nets like that. Your daughter was just one. And thank God she came to you and said, this doesn't seem right. For other kids who, you know, either don't think to do that, or hopefully maybe they don't even pay attention, whatever the case may be, they don't stop with just one. I couldn't believe it. It hurt my heart. I just thought, how hard to be a kid now. It was hard enough when I was growing up, and we didn't have social media at all. We didn't have cell phones, thank God. Not everybody had a camera at every turn. And I can't imagine trying to grow up these days. No privacy.
How much do you see that is involved with technology? I mean, do you see, when you do these interviews, do you see that it's leans more towards technology when problems occur?
There's an element of technology in every case that I investigated, from domestic violence cases to neighborhood disputes. There's always a trail, and writing search warrants for cell phones and computers, it provides so much information. It's like a roadmap a lot of times for a case, especially, you know, some of the homicide cases that we've worked. Getting into the cell phone was sometimes what broke the case. Finding out where our suspect was, if he had location services on. I try not to give a roadmap to our suspects on how
criminals
to evade crime, but you know, there's the age-old saying that we only catch the dumb ones, right? Sometimes that's true. Sometimes people just lead us to solving the case, and we appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, this might sound like a very naive question, but I got to ask it. Why do you think that we societally are so interested and intrigued with crime? Whether it's a docuseries and you know, you have the big splashy Hollywood crimes like the Murdoch, and we were all leaning into that. But I do feel like that we really like to lean into it. And I'm curious as to why you think that is.
I have two theories. One, I think, especially as women, we're often the victims, and there's this a little bit like there, but for the grace of God go I, right? I also think that how many times have you heard where, oh my God, he seemed like such a nice guy. He was just sort of normal, kind of kept to himself, but he was my neighbor. And the switch flipped, and now he crossed the Rubicon, and now here we are, and you find out he's a serial killer. I think also that as a culture, certainly in the United States, we want the good guys to win. We want to know if the train is going to jump the tracks, that there is a whole other, there's like a pod of people, an organization that is willing and able to put the train back on the tracks. And I always say, if law enforcement is doing the job the right way, they are those people. And so we long for order. That's my theory.
I love that.
Yeah, all of the above, and I think there's an element to people love solving puzzles, and I think that solving crime is kind of akin to solving a puzzle, and people are interested in how the puzzle gets solved.
That too.
I was really thinking that you were going to say what my gut was thinking, and is that the heinous stuff, I feel like we kind of can't take our eyes off it sometimes. Like it's this guilty pleasure a little bit where we don't want to admit it, but we want to like look at Jeffrey Dahmer or something and say, oh my God, how does this shit happen? Right? Do you think any of that's going on?
Absolutely.
I do, but I also think that there is a kind of how did that happen, right? Could that ever be me or somebody that I know that I'm close to that I loved and trust? What is the thing? What was the trigger? Was it just one trigger? Probably not. But I think there's a fascination in wanting to understand that kind of aberration so that you can feel in yourself like, that would never happen to me. I know I'm not even close to that. That's, I might want to flip off the guy who cut me off in traffic, but fuck, oops, sorry. I would never, skin somebody, eat their liver and then put the rest in the fridge. Yeah, that's way off limits. So I do think there's a gut check. How close to being that depraved could I be?
What is your level of crazy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are always people where you think, I knew them when, we grew up together. They were so fun. They were so great, blah, blah, blah. And then,
yeah,
it goes sideways.
The small town, it resonates because if you're from a small town, you're like, what? I went to high school with him, or, we live down the street. No idea.
No idea. You have no idea what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah, after I became a police officer, I arrested people that I had been friends with, that I went to high school with, that I worked with, and you really get a view into who the real person is when you walk into their house. And it's I'm not disparaging, because I know that there's probably some mental illness involved with it, but like a hoarder house. And you knew this person from work, and you would have never guessed, and you walk in their house and it's a hoarder house, and they've done terrible things to their pets. It really blows your mind. And I just piggybacking off of what Yardley was talking about with the fascination of true crime, I believe it's like 77% of our listeners are women.
Yes.
And I think women listen to these stories and their takeaway is, what are some tactics that I can use to avoid being the victim of one of these crimes?
I agree. I think there is something very odd that I sort of take for granted now, being one of the hosts of this podcast, that like I said, the victims are 99% of the time are women. So I'm part of that group. What is that? Like, it's just a really terrifying reality. And these are women who, whether or not they're drug affected or they're, CEO of their company, nothing protects them. If somebody decides you're the target, whether you know them or you're a random selection, nothing will protect you you can fight back, but you know what I'm saying? Like, your station in life is no guarantee that you won't end up like an episode of our podcast.
Wow. I keep thinking about the episode, and I can't remember, Dan, if it was House on the Hill. Is that you?
Yeah, that was a case that I investigated.
Okay. Well, for the ones listening, where you went into the house and you went into the closet and you separated the clothes and the back room and the mattresses. I mean, it's fascinating that people live like this and you have no idea.
You have no idea. And you go like, that's a movie. That's not real life. That's not my neighbor who lives on the house on the hill. Right?
I think the one takeaway, if whoever's listening and whoever listens to our podcast and who's listening to yours, that case, House on the Hill, when I separated the clothing, even when I was first talking to the husband and wife who end up being the suspects in this case, the hair on my neck stood up because I felt something was off. And I was told very early on in my cop career, when I was a little baby cop, to always listen to it. And listeners out there, if the hair on your neck stands up, take a moment and recognize it and maybe change your course of action.
You know, cross the street if you think somebody is following you. It doesn't matter if you're right. Just trust that instinct. If you feel like, you know what, I don't think I should go into that parking garage that's dark by myself. I'm going to go find somebody to walk me to my car. Don't be afraid to ask for help in that way. And don't feel like, I'm just a ninny if you decide I'm kind of hanked up now. Just trust it, because God, you don't want to be wrong about that.
Yeah. Anybody out there, you have to participate in your own personal security. That's part of your responsibility. Unfortunately, there are people out there who are willing to do bad things to other human beings, and that's just a fact. And if you're naive to that, then you're putting yourself in not a great position.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too is that a lot of times we become trusting based on, as you said, Yardley, station in life or profession. And as someone in the military, boy, some of the most heinous things happen in the military, and you would never think that. These are people that protect the country. And so I do think that's so astute to say, trust your fucking gut,
Yeah, I do.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
all you have, and then fight like hell. That's what Dan always told me anyway.
I fight like hell. I can't stress it enough. People most of these predators, and in talking with Paul Holes, who's done a lot of work on the kind of the profiling side of these offenders. Most of these offenders want an easy fight. They don't want you to fight at all. They just want you to surrender. And it's the sexual sadist who wants you to fight back.
Yeah.
There's only like a little category of offender out there that really gets off on you fighting back. So I would take my chances and I would fight like hell. Fight like your life depends on it, because it very well may.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So one final thing that I know everyone listening is going to want to know. What particular case for both of you really stuck with you, surprised you, haunted you?
I would say, I mean, really, it's sort of like when people ask me, what's your favorite Simpsons episode? As the voice of Lisa Simpson, it's like impossible to choose from over 800. We don't have 800 episodes on Small Town Dicks, but we have a lot that I feel like we did really extraordinarily well. I'm going to give you my top three. So, in no particular order, I guess. End of Watch, which was the one where it's a two-parter, where Dan was first on scene and did CPR on an officer who died at the scene, and Dave was part of that one as well. And it was a woman, actually, who shot this officer. And I think in hearing how it affected, the ripple effect of that crime was so deep that I was deeply affected by that. We aired an episode last week called brain fart. What was the one? It's about called Justice for Wilder. And I do for the last several seasons, I've done a little preamble where I tell the listeners, like, hey, this is sort of what our case is about, so people can settle, right? Again, nobody is just listening to your podcast. They're all doing something else while they listen. So sort of set them up, tell them what's coming. And if it's a child abuse case or a case about suicide, certain things that we always give a trigger warning. This case in particular, it was child abuse. And I said, for me, is a real study in evil, which is not a word I really use very often because I think it's overused and I think it's lost a lot of its potency. But the intent of this offender against this 2-year-old was so fucking dark and so awful. I really, even in my edit, even as I put on my editor hat, really had a hard time with that one. And another one that's really stuck with me is one called Rampage that Detective Dave investigated. We have the suspect interview, part of the suspect interview in that episode. And Dave, because this is how you gain the trust of the people you're trying to get them to tell you the worst decision they made, right? You cannot exhibit any judgment, no matter what the crime. And so Dave, the guy says, I'm hungry. They eat McDonald's while the guy tells Dave that he killed his parents, that he purposely hit people in the crosswalk. It was a rampage. And that one feels really just shocking and unforgettable. And again, back to the matter of factness of this guy, you know, whether or not he had met his potential as a human being in life, he was sort of more or less normal. His parents were a little frustrated with him because he wouldn't move out, but I don't think there were a whole lot of signs that he was going to do that. So,
Yeah, the one that will always stick with me is End of Watch. It's the murder of Chris Kilcullen, who was a motorcycle officer in the neighboring agency. Really tragic case. Some good things have happened out of that case. I got to meet Chris's wife and his family, and they're wonderful people. I've made some friends that I probably otherwise wouldn't have with that other department because of my involvement in that case. So that's one that's always going to stick with me. I think about Chris every day. He was just one of those guys that God broke the mold when he made Chris. He was just a really nice person. And then another case that I investigated that kind of it shows you the level of depravity of human beings it was called Impact. And it's about a hit and run accident where a woman who's driving intoxicated hits a man who's in a crosswalk, and he ends up on the top of the car, and she drives with this man on top of the car for over a mile and then pulls over because it's harder to see out of the windshield because he broke the windshield and part of his body is hanging over the windshield, and she just peels him off the top of the car and drives away.
Oh my
It's
God.
shocking, and it shows you the level of depravity of human beings that they could do that to another person. I won't give too much away, but there's a passenger in the car too, which makes it all the more unbelievable that this woman did this. And it's cases like that that really stick with me. That there was a man who was just minding his business,
he was
walking
visiting
home.
his family that weekend.
He's visiting his son. He hadn't seen his son in years, and that was the first night they were together. And he was crossing the street with his son. His son made it to the curb a second earlier than this father, and it cost the father his life. And that it just he died there alone on the side of the street when minutes ago he was with his son. It's just terrible.
Uh-huh. Wow. Well, I can only imagine the pillow talk that goes on between Yeardley and Detective Dan. But
it's sort of more like, what do you have tomorrow? Let's see. Well, we're doing this interview with she's a 10 times 5, and then we have a blah blah blah, and then I have a blah. Okay, great. Sleep tight.
yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you for producing this type of content. I think I was just really impressed with the variety, and I learned a lot. Like again, Michelle and I had kind of gotten down the rabbit hole and had to pull each other out of it. But there's such an element of
for recording this, from watching and listening.
Yeah. I'm like, come on, focus. But I do think that when you lean in, you learn a lot and you take away a lot and appreciate the value of what law enforcement and detectives do. It's just mind blowing. And what they go through, we need to be compassionate. And I think we've lost that. So thank you for bringing it to the surface for us.
I thank you. And I couldn't agree more with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I've got a buddy who went to West Point, and I know that you can't just float your way through 4 years at West Point. I know that.
Yeah, it's I made it out alive and I don't know how, but yeah, that was a beat ago. So, but thank you for acknowledging. Okay, we cannot, and we always like to end on fun because that's,
Sure.
you get in the vibe. But Yardley, we have to talk about the voiceover.
Oh, sure. The one and only Lisa
Oh.
Simpson.
Lisa, oh, thank you.
She's the best. Lisa Simpson, maybe the best female character created for any medium ever at any time. It is an honor to be her voice.
Yes, thank you for that. I love it. That's a clip that my two adult boys are going to love too, because they're huge fans of the Simpsons. We did way back when, I think it was in our first season, we interviewed Lauren Tom.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And, she does a slew of voiceovers. And then I went down the rabbit hole. Should I do voiceovers? So,
well,
yeah.
what's funny is people like Lauren Tom. There's a woman on The Simpsons named Tress McNeil who does like hundreds of incidental voices each episode. She's her whole career is voiceover. So she's done every Saturday morning cartoon. When Disney does, for instance, a video version of Snow White, but it's not the original feature film, Tress is the Wicked Queen. The days of being able to make your living that way in voiceover are really shrinking because now everything is stunt cast, right? Ever since sort of Shrek, I would say, then when they realize like, oh, celebrities want to slum it and do voiceovers, which I think is, I think the idea that voiceover is somehow doesn't require as much of you as an actor as being on camera or on stage is false. The idea that I would give less of my heart and soul and 100% effort to Lisa Simpson just because you don't see my face, you see a sweet little bright yellow person with 4 fingers on the screen, is fucking bullshit. Why would I do that? That's just ridiculous. So I do take umbrage with this idea that you can just sort of phone it in, no pun intended, because it's not true. The best performances are never that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you're still acting and learning lines. And I think it's got to be a little bit harder, right? Without having the whole ambiance around you and the interaction. It's an art.
It is an art. Thank you. We used to, before the pandemic, we would record The Simpsons all together like an old radio play. So, which is quite unusual for voiceover. For instance, most of them, you just go in and do your lines by yourself. Since the pandemic, we've started to do that. And I would say only because we're in season 35, which is an extraordinary sentence unto itself. We're such a well-oiled machine. I can, of course, do the voice of Lisa Simpson. I look at her lines on the page and I sort of see her, right? You drop into this little Lisa Simpson portal. But what you miss is if I have a scene with Homer and Dan Castellaneta, who does that voice, and Dan does something really fantastic and unusual, which happens all the time, it's going to inform the way I would respond as Lisa Simpson. So I have to sort of infer what I think Dan is doing as Homer in that scene, and therefore craft my reaction around an inference, which I think is, you lose some of the texture and some of the magic, but it's where we are. And look, I'm just so grateful to still have a job, especially, we didn't record during the work stoppages when SAG and the Writers Guild were on strike, but look, I'm one of the lucky ones, so I'll never take that for granted.
Well, do you ever call up a food order or something? And
no, but I sound so much like Lisa Simpson.
Everybody.
I have had people say to me, both in the supermarket checkout line, more often I would say on the phone, if you don't know me, they'd be like, I gotta ask you, your voice sounds so familiar. And of course they can't place it because in your mind, Lisa Simpson is 8, right? And I'm
Right.
59. So you're speaking to an adult and you're like, there's no way that voice is an 8-year-old. Unless you're super duper Simpsons fan, then you either recognize the name or my voice is so close to that of Lisa Simpson's. You're like, I know who the fuck that is. This is awesome. So, but I also will say, people always ask me what's one of the best things about Lisa Simpson and doing the voice is that wherever I go in the world, if people find out I do the voice of Lisa Simpson, even if they're not super fans of the show, they're happy to see me. That little girl engenders so much joy, even if you just sort of have a passing fancy with the show. And I have to say, that doesn't happen to everybody. And that is a pretty extraordinary extra with this already extraordinary job.
Amen. I love it. Okay. So we like to do a little thing called the luxury pickleball lightning round. You guys down?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
I'm
intriguing.
I'm a pickleball obsessed woman. It's what,
I've played pickleball once and I'm equally obsessed.
yeah, it sure is fun. And it's got a social element. So, all right. So she's a 10. You get 20% off luxury pickleball, and they curate high quality products and I use them and experiences. All right, let's go. Okay. I hope your crew, your team didn't inform you too much about the mayhem Michelle and I are gonna unleash on you right now, did they?
No, let's have it.
All right.
Just 5 fun questions. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. First one. We're gonna start off easy and then we're gonna heat up.
Okay.
Where's your happy place?
For me, it's on the sofa with Dan with our one remaining cat while I'm knitting, watching a great scripted series. Like right now, we're watching season 3 of Slow Horses.
Ooh, good show.
Mm-hmm.
I would say we vacation in a place in Mexico. It's like south of Cancun, and sitting on the beach with my wife you just can't beat it. It's awesome.
That's good too. Yeah, I like that.
That's a good answer. Okay. Second one. If you could sit next to anyone on an airplane, who would it be?
Oh, I want to sit next to, I think his name is Billy Billingham. So we watched World's Toughest Test the last 2 seasons, and they have 4, special forces guys. 2 are from the SAS. Are they both from the SAS?
Yeah, I think they're SAS.
So
Or
Billy,
Royal Marines, something like that.
yes, there are 2 British and then 2 American. This guy, he's so grizzled. He's so craggy. He has really short. So there of the British guys, there's one with dark hair, and then there's one with a very short crew cut, sort of graying hair. And he's so intense. I am certain that under that intensity, and that because it takes a singular kind of dedication to do that job, which I also find fascinated by people who do extreme things, including law enforcement. I want to know, like, dude, who are you? How do you do what you do and why? But also, what's under that grizzle? I know I can get there. I know it. And I just want to give him a hug. So I would do that.
I think for me, it's the first book that my dad ever gave me was about Jackie Robinson. And I grew up in a baseball family. I played baseball pretty much my whole life.
Professional baseball. Let's just add that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Minor league ball.
I couldn't hit. I could field, but I can't hit. Anyway, moving on. Jackie Robinson is just one of the people that I've always been fascinated with. The journey that he went through, with such grace, and I just admire that man so much, and I would love to have a conversation with him.
wow. Again, I want to go back to, I think there's more to this pillow talk than your answers. Yeah,
Maybe so.
there's a lot of depth. Okay, this is a really important one. Do you believe in aliens?
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mhm. No, it's ridiculous to think this is it for sentient beings. Oh my God, we're in trouble.
Right?
What? Not at all. Not possible.
We could
Yeah.
talk all day about it.
Yeah.
I mean, how many billions of galaxies are there out there in the universe? And we think we're the only ones that have intelligent human or intelligent life. I think that's
I
pretty
just think
naive.
it's really speaks also to the narcissistic tendencies of human beings. Be like, nuh-uh, we're the only ones. I'm like, that is just, that's asinine. No, no,
Yeah.
can't join you there.
Yeah. Well, I would ask you about what you think the Chinese spy balloon is, but we're running out of time.
Ah, I don't think it's a weather balloon.
No.
Going with that.
I think that was a test run personally, but
It kind of, I'm not going to lie, and I don't want to divert this because Michelle's got another good question, but it kind of keeps me up at night because as an ex-military, we've sent fast movers up there to shoot it down, and then it's never been mentioned again. I'm like, well, whatever happened to those balloons? Anyway.
yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. Next question. Yeah, we'll skip right over that because we do talk about that a lot. Favorite concert?
Oh, as I get older, I've been told I'm what's known as an ambivert. So I can be extroverted when I need to be. I can sort of deploy the shiny grenade, as my business partner Ben likes to say. But in order to do that, I recharge like an introvert. So I like to be with one or two, maybe three good friends, or by myself. That's how I shore up, as opposed to a true extrovert who is like, I need to go to a concert to get my juice back. So I'm not really a concert goer, really, literally. Although Dan and I did recently go to a concert this summer. It was Dirk Bentley.
Mhm.
And I'm not a Dirk Bentley fan, but I don't really know any of his songs, certainly not by heart. But what I really loved was seeing all those musicians at the top of their game. So it didn't matter to me that I didn't know the songs by heart or was not a super fan. I loved seeing people in excellence doing the thing that it seemed to me they were clearly born to do. So I loved that.
That's awesome.
For me, it was the first concert I ever went to was Dave Matthews Band, like back in 1994. I think that was like that was the year that he like blew up.
Yeah, he was big in the 90s.
Yeah, so I went to a concert. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Go Dave.
Go
Go
Dave.
Good,
Go
Dave.
Okay, last one. If you could tell your former self a little choice nugget of wisdom that you now have gleaned today, what would that be?
Compare and despair.
Ooh.
So I've spent I'm a recovering perfectionist, which is also a zero-sum game. Children, don't strive for perfection. It will hurt your heart, and you won't ever make it. But I think for me, as I still kind of have to, I watched myself actually do it here with Dan, where when he's like saying, I want to sit next to Jackie Robinson on a plane, I'm like, fuck, dude, that's a really good answer. And I find myself comparing my answers to Dan's answers and feeling like my answers were inadequate. And so it's a really hard habit to break. I think with the internet, it absolutely fosters this. You should aspire to have this perfect life. We talk about it ad nauseum about Instagram being, these are the best parts of somebody's life. Maybe it's 1%. And even as much as we talk about it, we don't correct it. So I think that's what I would tell my younger self. Just don't go down that rabbit hole.
Love that so much.
I think I would have spent more time at the driving range hitting golf balls and gotten better so I could be a golf pro. But then I would have never met my wife, and I can't do that either. No, I think I have some regrets about my effort when I was in school. I was playing baseball at the time, so that was really my focus was baseball. school was a necessary evil to play baseball in college, and I wish I would have flipped that a little bit.
But I want to say, so Dan still coaches baseball. He helped coach the St. Paul Saints before they got bought by the Minnesota Twins, and coaches some summer ball teams. And the baseball field is exactly where Detective Dan should be. That is his church. And to see him even now, he says, oh, I'm out of shape, I'm out of practice. To see him field, oh my God, that guy, you're going like, oh, well, that's what you're meant to do. So I think that I'm just sticking up for you because your skills as a baseball player are legit.
Thank you. Thank you, honey.
Yeah.
Listen, and I'm no baseball expert, but I think you can recognize excellence, right? I don't have to play the banjo to go like, dude, that is a thing. Like you're doing a thing. So
It'd be pretty cool if you played the banjo.
Yeah, it would. But that's, no.
I want to see. I want to see that. I want to see banjo. Yeah.
Yeah.
How much you learn on the baseball field. My father was a baseball coach for 36 years, and I grew up. I always say I grew up in the dugout. I knew how to score by the time I was like 9. I was out there, E6. So I get it, but so much that you learn from that. So I relate when you say that because I'm like grades were kind of secondary, but think about all that you take away from the.
I agree. Life experience. And I do think a lot of your love of school depends on the teacher. How engaged and engaging are they? And I'm not saying it's not all teacher, but all of us have it, probably at least one teacher where I was really good at English because I had a terrific English teacher in 9th and 10th grade. So I wanted to do really well. I was not good at math. I had a math teacher who was not interested in my inability to comprehend geometry. So I was like, well, fuck it. All right. I guess it doesn't matter. Who cares if I know what an isosceles triangle is?
Well, Yeardley, I had a really good sex education teacher.
There you go.
Just saying.
I'm going to leave that right there.
That's why she keeps
Right
going
there.
back to the pillow talk.
Ah, there it is.
Yep. All right. Let's tell everyone where to find your amazing stuff.
Okay. So you can find Small Town Dicks everywhere you get your podcasts. And we actually have a spinoff, which is really educational, called The Briefing Room, which Detectives Dan and Dave host. The first season, I was a part of it. The second season, I was fired. And but it's not case driven, but it really is more policy driven, why law enforcement has to do these things the way they do, sort of the bumpers that are put on the profession, but also one of those deep dives about phone safety with kids, for instance, and mental health in law enforcement. So that's a terrific one too. And you can get that wherever you get your podcast too.
Yeah. And check us out on social media. We have, I think all the big ones, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I think I even heard we're on TikTok now, which I don't have TikTok, but
for the young ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to say again, thank you so much for everything that you do. And I mean, not only it's entertaining, but the whole educational aspect of it. We love it. We absolutely love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It means the world to us. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you to our audience. All right. Until next time. Adios. Okay, guys. That was awesome.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you. That was so fun. What a
Yeah.
terrific.
Are you looking for high-end pickleball equipment, attire, or even a luxe pickleball vacation? Introducing Luxury Pickleball, the curator of all products and experiences for your social or competitive pickleballer. Paddles, attire, accessories, and quality life experiences wherever you travel with your paddle. Use discount code SHE'S10. That's SHE'S10 for 20% off for quality on and off the court. Let's go.
Follow us on Instagram at She's a 10 times 5. You can click on the link in our bio to listen to all of our previous episodes, as well as check out our live video interviews over our YouTube channel. You can also find us on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, pretty much wherever else you decide to listen to your favorite podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe.